At the wedding, my friend's mother invited me to dance. Then she whispered, "Don't let go of me just yet." "Hello, my name is Miles. I live in Eugene, Oregon, in a cramped one-bedroom apartment that barely holds my desk, a worn-out couch, and a coffee maker that's seen better days. I work at a small marketing agency, fixing servers and untangling software bugs. Nothing glamorous, but it covers the bills. I'm not the type who thrives at parties. I've never been that guy. I'd rather spend my evenings lost in video games or scrolling through tech forums than chatting up strangers. I've had a few relationships, fleeting ones that fizzled out because I could never quite voice what I felt. People call me quiet, maybe too quiet, but it suits me. That's just who I am." I got an invitation to a wedding. It was for an old college acquaintance, Owen. We weren't close, just study buddies on a couple of group projects back then, but he sent a card out of courtesy. I almost skipped it. Crowds, thumping music, forced smiles. That's not my scene. But turning it down felt rude. So, I threw on a navy blazer, a tie I hadn't touched since graduation, and headed to a modest reception hall on the edge of town. The room was strung with twinkling lights and white roses, tables draped in crisp linen, the kind of setup that screams effort. I snagged a glass of white wine from a passing tray and claimed a quiet spot in the back, happy to blend into the shadows. The ceremony was short and sweet, full of the usual vows and applause. Owen beamed with joy, his bride glowing in her gown. I clapped along, sipped my wine, and traded small talk with a few half-remembered classmates who barely recalled me. I figured I'd slip out right after the cake cutting. Then I saw her. She swept into the room like she owned it, but without any showiness. She wore a deep green dress that hugged her figure with effortless grace. Her dark hair was pulled into a low chignon, a few loose strands framing her face. She was tall and poised, with eyes that didn't smile but pulled you in anyway, like they could see straight through you. I didn't know her, but I couldn't look away. I was leaning against a pillar, half listening to some guy ramble about his new job, when she approached. Her heels clicked softly on the hardwood floor. Before I could react, she was right there in front of me. "Are you a friend of Owen's?" she asked, her voice low and smooth, like she was used to being heard without raising it. I straightened up, caught off guard. Yeah, not super close, but, enough for an invite." I cringed inwardly at my awkwardness. She tilted her head, studied me for a beat, then said, "I'm Vivian, Owen's mother." My brain short-circuited. His mother? She didn't look like any mom I'd pictured. Maybe in her 40s, but she could pass for younger, with a natural elegance that made the whole room feel smaller. "Oh, I managed because what else do you say? Nice to meet you." She smiled, just a subtle curve of her lips, and I felt my face heat up. "I hate dancing alone," she said, her eyes locked on mine. "Do you dance?" It wasn't really a question. It felt like she'd already decided I'd say yes. I opened my mouth to protest. "I'm no dancer. My coordination works better with a keyboard than a waltz." But something in her gaze stopped me. "Sure," I said, setting my glass on a nearby table. "Why not?" She led me to the dance floor, where the band played a slow, jazzy tune I didn't recognize. The crowd parted like they knew better than to get in her way. I swear every eye was on us, or maybe that was just my nerves. She turned to me, one hand resting lightly on my shoulder, the other guiding mine to her waist. "Follow my lead," she said, her voice steady and commanding, like she was used to giving directions. I nodded, careful not to step on her toes, my heart pounding harder than the music. Her dress felt soft under my fingers, her body warm and sure as we moved. I wasn't really dancing, I was letting her guide me. But it didn't feel clumsy. It was like she was teaching me something, I just didn't know what yet. The song ended, but she didn't let go. "One more?" she asked, her eyes sparkling under the lights. I nodded, speechless. We kept going, and I realized I wasn't thinking about the steps anymore. I was just there, with her, the room blurring into a haze of lights and sounds. The music faded into the hum of chatter and clinking glasses. But my mind stayed on that floor, replaying her hand on my arm, the way her eyes had held mine like she was searching for a secret. I stood there for a moment, alone in the crowd, my heart still racing. She'd drifted to the edge of the room, her green dress catching the glow of the garlands. I could have left it at that, a strange, electric moment that would fade by morning. But something pulled me toward her, like an invisible thread I couldn't break. I found her outside, in the little garden behind the hall. Golden string lights draped from low branches, casting a soft glow over the stone path. The air was cool, scented with faint roses and fresh-cut grass, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. Vivian stood by a wooden bench, arms loosely crossed, her silhouette sharp against the warm light. She didn't turn as I approached, but I knew she'd heard my footsteps. I stopped a few paces away, shoving my hands in my pockets to steady them. "Why did you ask me to dance again?" I finally asked, my voice quieter than I'd meant. It wasn't the smoothest opener, but it was the question burning in me. She turned then, her eyes meeting mine, and a raw emotion flashed across her face. One I hadn't seen on the dance floor. "You really want to know?" she replied, her voice low and firm, with an edge that twisted my gut. I nodded, silent. She stepped closer, her heels echoing softly on the stone. "Because I'm tired of being invisible," she said, the words sharp but not angry. "At my age, in a place like this, I'm just the groom's mother. People smile, make polite chit-chat, but they don't really see me. I'm the backdrop, the woman who raised the man of the hour, and then they expect me to fade into the background." She paused, her eyes searching mine, daring me to argue. "I asked you to dance because I wanted to feel seen. I wanted to know if I could still turn someone's head." My breath caught. Her honesty cut through the noise in my head like a knife. All night, I'd felt out of place, adrift among the laughing friends and families. And here she was, admitting she felt the same, just wearing a different mask. "You did more than that," I blurted before I could stop myself. "You didn't just throw me off balance. You made me feel like I was really here, like I wasn't just some guy lurking in the corner." Her lips parted, and for a second, she looked surprised, like she hadn't expected me to match her vulnerability. Then she smiled, a small, genuine one that softened her, made her seem younger. "You're not what I expected, Miles," she murmured. "Most guys your age wouldn't notice me, or if they did, they'd laugh it off and move on." "I'm not most guys," I shot back. It came out bolder than I felt. Inside, I was a mess, my thoughts spinning under the weight of the moment. She was Owen's mother, 20 years older than me, someone you nod to politely and forget. But out here, under those golden lights, she wasn't just that. She was Vivian, a woman who just laid herself bare in a way that squeezed my chest. She stepped closer, near enough that I caught her scent again, that warm, floral note that clung to her like a memory. "You don't know what you're saying," she whispered. But there was no warning in her tone, just curiosity, like she was testing me. "Yes, I do," I insisted, holding her gaze. "You're not invisible. Not to me. You reminded me I have a pulse." The words felt too big, too raw, but true. She'd stirred something buried under layers of routine and caution. We stood there for what felt like ages, the air between us thick with unspoken things. Music drifted faintly from the hall, slow and distant. The lights flickered in the breeze. I wanted to touch her, close the gap, but I didn't. Not yet. She tilted her head, her eyes softening. "Your trouble, Miles. The kind I didn't see coming." I laughed, a nervous sound that broke the tension. "Yeah, and you're not exactly what I expected either." She glanced toward the hall, where the party was in full swing, laughter spilling into the night. "I should head back in," she said, but she didn't move right away. Her eyes lingered on mine, weighing something. Then she stepped back, smoothing her dress. "Thanks for the dances," she added, her voice steady again. But there was a new warmth in it. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking softly, and I watched her vanish into the hall's glow, heart pounding, mind haunted by that one word, invisible. The room buzzed with laughter and music when I slipped back inside. The band had switched to an upbeat number. The floor teemed with couples, kids, and tipsy uncles attempting wobbly steps. I scanned the crowd for Vivian, spotting her at the head table, chatting with Owen and his new wife. She laughed at something he said, head thrown back, but it looked forced, like she was slipping back into her role as the groom's mom. I grabbed another glass of wine from a tray, mostly to keep my hands busy, and retreated to my corner. But I couldn't stop watching her. The night dragged on with speeches, toasts, cake cutting. I clapped when I had to, nodded through idle talk. But my thoughts wandered back to that garden, her voice, her eyes. I was about to bail, figuring the evening was winding down, when she appeared again, cutting through the crowd with purpose. She stopped in front of me, her expression unreadable but her eyes sharp as a blade. "One last dance?" she asked softly, almost like a challenge. I set my glass down, mouth dry. "Yeah, one more." We made our way to the floor as the band eased into a slower tune, a soft piano melody that felt made for us. Her hand found my shoulder, mine her waist, and we fell into the rhythm. Familiar now, but this time, it was different. No pretense, no polite distance. Her body pressed closer, her fingers digging into my arm, and I felt her warmth through the fabric of her dress. The crowd blurred. The lights dimmed in my mind until there was just her, just us, moving like we'd rehearsed it 100 times. She leaned in, her breath warm against my ear. "You meant it, didn't you? What you said outside?" she whispered, barely audible over the music. I swallowed hard, heart hammering. "About your invisibility? Yeah, I meant it." She pulled back just enough to look at me, her eyes probing mine for truth. Then she closed the space again, her hand sliding to the back of my neck, fingers brushing my skin. "Be careful, Miles," she breathed, her voice soft but weighted. "You're making my heart race like it hasn't in years." I froze, my steps faltering for a second, but she kept us moving, her grip steady. "Because of me?" I asked, my voice rough, almost scared. She didn't hesitate. She placed her hand on my chest, right over my heart, possessive, deliberate. "Do you feel it?" she said, eyes locked on mine. "That's you." My pulse thundered under her palm, and I nodded, unable to look away. "Good," she murmured, so quiet I almost missed it. "Because mine's not listening to me anymore either." The music played on, but we'd stopped dancing. We stood still in the middle of the floor, her hand on my chest, mine on her waist. It wasn't a kiss, nothing physical beyond that touch, but it meant more. A confession, a line crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. The song ended. Applause pulled us back to reality. She stepped away, her hand dropping, but her eyes held mine a beat longer. "I'm heading out soon," she said, voice firm again, like she was pulling herself together. "If you want to know who I really am, find me later. Otherwise, remember me as a good dancer." She turned and wove through the crowd, her green dress catching the light. I stood rooted, chest tight, mind reeling. Find her. How? Where? She was Owen's mother, someone I shouldn't even be thinking about like this. Someone from a world worlds away from mine. But her words, her touch, her gaze. It wasn't just a dance anymore. It was a dare, a question I wasn't sure I had the guts to answer. I watched her melt into the crowd, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff I couldn't step back from. The hall hummed with clinking plates and bursts of laughter, but I was frozen where she'd left me, her words echoing, "If you want to know who I really am, find me later." My chest still held the warmth of her hand, my pulse refusing to slow. I saw her thread through the guests, her green dress, a flash of color amid the tuxes and sequins, until she vanished near the head table. I wanted to follow, to say something, anything, but my feet wouldn't budge. She was Owen's mom. For God's sake, 20 years older, tied to a life of family and obligations I could never touch. But the way she'd looked at me, the way her voice had softened, admitting her heart raced because of me, that wasn't fleeting, it was a door. And I didn't know if I had the nerve to walk through it. I left the wedding early, ducking out before the bouquet toss, the party's chaos fading behind me. Outside, the Oregon night was crisp, the parking lot quiet except for distant traffic, hum and gravel crunching under my shoes. I drove home, replaying every second of those dances, her hand on my neck, her words about invisibility. I didn't sleep that night. Perched on my couch, I stared at the blank TV screen, wondering what finding her even meant. Show up at Owen's? Call her? Was she serious? Or just playing a game to feel alive for a few hours? The thought of her waiting for a move I never made twisted my stomach. Days slipped by without action. I dove back into work, debugging code, answering emails, but it all felt rote. Every time I closed my eyes, there she was. Those piercing eyes, that subtle smile, the brush of her fingers on my skin, I told myself to let it go, that it was just a moment, not a mission. But I couldn't shake it. I checked my phone obsessively, hoping for a ghost message. I'd even looked up Owen's last name on social media, hovering on the edge of digging deeper. It felt too much like crossing a line I wasn't ready for. Then, at my desk staring at a blank screen, my phone buzzed. An Instagram notification. I barely used the app, just followed a few tech accounts and old college pals, so it caught me off guard. The DM was from an unfamiliar profile, Vivian Hale. My heart stopped. Her profile pic showed her with loose hair, standing by a bookshelf, no makeup, but those same sharp eyes. The message read, "I hate social media, but I like tracking down the guy who danced with me without asking my age." I stared at the words, thumb frozen over the screen. She'd found me. Not just found me, she'd made the first move when I'd been too scared to try. My hands shook as I typed a reply, aiming for light to match her vibe. And I liked the woman who made me forget how to think straight, even if it was just for 3 songs. I hit send before overthinking it, pulse roaring in my ears. A minute later. Good, because I'm still thinking about those songs too. We messaged back and forth for days. Nothing heavy at first, just surface stuff. She asked about my job, I quizzed her on hers, a media consultant gig. It was cautious, like we were both dipping toes in the water, afraid to dive. She didn't mention the wedding outright, neither did I, but it hovered in every line. I ached to see her again, to know if that spark on the dance floor was real or just wine and lights. But I didn't ask. Not yet. One evening, she sent something that wasn't a question or a joke. "There's a bookstore downtown, The Quiet Page. I'll be there Saturday at 3. If you're free, come find me. No hard feelings, if not." My breath hitched. It was a clear invite, no pressure. A choice, like the one she'd given me at the wedding. I didn't reply right away. I let it simmer, weighing pros and cons. It was 2 days off. 2 days to decide if I was brave enough to chase this or let it become a memory, a story for lonely nights in my too quiet apartment. I didn't know what I'd do if I showed, or even if I would. But as I set my phone down, her garden words echoed, "I'm tired of being invisible." And I realized I didn't want to be the guy who let her feel that way again. Saturday came faster than I expected. I paced my apartment that morning, coffee going cold on the counter. The Quiet Page was a cozy nook downtown, with creaky floors and shelves overflowing with used books. I'd walked past it 100 times without going in. Now, the idea of meeting her there not in a glittering hall, but under harsh daylight knotted my gut. I showered, pulled on a clean shirt and jeans, checked my reflection twice like it mattered. It did. I wanted to be someone worth a second glance, not just the kid who'd stumbled through a dance. I arrived early, the shop's bell jingling as I stepped in. The air smelled of old paper and coffee, faint jazz murmured from a corner speaker. It was peaceful, just a handful of browsers, flipping pages, a barista wiping down the cafe counter and back. I scanned the room, heart thumping, and there she was. Vivian, at a corner table by the window, a paperback open in front of her, a steaming black coffee beside it. She wasn't quite the wedding version of her. No green dress, no elegant updo. She wore a white button-down with sleeves rolled to her elbows, dark hair in a loose ponytail. She looked real, like any passerby, but her presence still filled the space. Her sharp eyes lifted and met mine. "Miles," she said, closing her book with a soft thud. Her voice was calm, but warmth edged it, a half smile tugging her lips. "You came?" I nodded, pulling out the chair across from her, hands fidgety on my lap. "Yeah, I couldn't let you think I'd forgotten those dances." She laughed, a low, genuine sound that eased the knot in my chest. "Good," she said, leaning back, "because I haven't either." We ordered coffees black for her, a latte for me, and started with easy talk. She asked about my week, the coding snag that had me stuck. I probed her job, that media consulting world she navigated. It flowed, like we'd done this before, but an undercurrent made me hyper-aware of her, every move. The way her fingers traced her mug's rim, how her eyes softened when she smiled. She shared snippets of her life, unexpected ones. Her divorce, which had left her unmoored. Raising Owen alone, always the strong one for him. "You get used to it," she said. Voice steady but tinged with shadow. "Being the one who holds it all together. But sometimes you want someone to see past that." I leaned forward, elbows on the table. Coffee forgotten. "I saw you," I said, the words gentler than I'd planned. "At the wedding, not just as Owen's mom, as you." Her eyes held mine, and for a moment she went quiet, studying me like she was testing my honesty. Then she smiled, a small, vulnerable one that tugged at my heart. "That's what made those dances special," she said. "You didn't look at me like I was supposed to be invisible. You looked at me like I was alive." The air between us thickened again, like on the dance floor but without music or crowds to hide behind. I wanted to reach across the table, brush her hand, but I held back. Instead, I said, "You're more than alive, Vivian. You're the kind of woman who makes everyone else feel like they're half living their own lives." She laughed, shaking her head. "You're trouble, Miles. You know that." But her eyes were tender, and I knew it wasn't a warning. She told me about her days as a journalist, chasing stories across the country, until Owen came along and she slowed down. "I don't regret it," she said, fingers stroking her book's spine. "But sometimes I wonder who I'd be without that pause." I opened up about my own routine, the quiet coding in my apartment, the walls I kept up for safety. "I don't know why I'm telling you this," I admitted, cheeks warming. "I don't usually talk like that." She tilted her head, eyes steady. "Maybe because I'm listening." We lingered for hours, the shop emptying around us, the barista stacking chairs. It wasn't the wedding's wine and lights and music. It was just us two people in a quiet corner, talking like old friends. But it was more than words. It was how her eyes held mine, how her voice warmed saying my name. It was the feeling of being seen, truly seen, like I hadn't been in years. When we finally stood to leave, the sun was dipping low, casting long shadows through the window. "That was nice," she said, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "Unexpected, but nice." I nodded, throat tight. "Yeah, it was." And as we stepped into the evening, I knew it wasn't over. It was another step, one I wasn't sure I was ready for, but one I couldn't turn back from. The sun had set by the time Vivian and I left the quiet page, the bell tinkling softly behind us. The air was sharp, carrying hints of rain and fallen leaves. Street lamps spilled warm light on the empty sidewalk. We stood there a while, our shadows stretching across the pavement, in no rush to part. My hands buried in my pockets, my heart still buzzing from hours of talk from the way her eyes had probed my silences. This wasn't the wedding's music and magic. It was real, raw, and it scared me as much as it drew me in. Vivian adjusted her bag, her white shirt catching the dim glow. She looked at me, expression soft but unreadable, then pulled out the paperback she'd been reading, a slim, worn volume. "If I send you the song from our first dance at the wedding, would you dance with me again?" she asked, voice low and deliberate. "Just for me, no audience." Her words hung there, not quite a question. More an invitation to something we hadn't named. I swallowed, throat tight. "I don't need music," I replied, meeting her gaze. "Just someone to keep the rhythm." Her lips curved into a small, real smile. And for a flash, I saw the dance floor woman again, the one who'd made me forget who and where I was supposed to be. But I also saw today's version, the one across from me in a quiet bookstore, sharing her life, her loneliness, her strength. They were the same woman, and I wanted to know them both. She stepped closer, eyes unwavering, and pressed the book into my hands. "Keep it," she said. "It's not much, but it's a start." I glanced down. A collection of poetry, pages soft from use, a sticky note marking a middle page. "What's this for?" I asked, voice dropping lower than I'd intended. She shrugged, a playful glint in her eye. "So you have a reason to find me again, to give it back." I laughed, the sound lightening the ache in my chest. "You make goodbyes hard," I said. She tilted her head, smile softening. "Good. I don't want you to say one. We didn't set a date. No plans to meet again. No labels for what this was. Friendship, more, impossible. We just stood there as night settled in, and I felt a beginning. Not a promise, not a title, but a thread connecting us, one we could follow or snap. "I'll text you," I said finally, gripping the book tighter. She nodded, her eyes catching the lamplight. "I'll reply." I watched her head to her car, steps confident, ponytail swaying lightly. She didn't look back, but I didn't need her to. The book in my hands, the weight of her words, the memory of her touch on the floor that was enough to tie me to her, at least for now. I walked home. Eugene's streets were still, radio off. My apartment felt smaller when I got there, the silence heavier. I set the book on the coffee table, sticky note untouched. I didn't open it. Not yet. It felt like something to savor, a moment I wasn't ready to unfold. Days passed, and we texted. Short bursts at first, then longer ones about everything and nothing. She sent a link to the wedding song, Unchained Melody, with one line. "Still think you don't need music?" I fired back a photo of the book on my table. "Still think I need a reason to find you?" It was a careful dance of words, tentative but deliberate, like we were navigating fresh ground. I didn't know where it led. Maybe nowhere an ember that burned out. Maybe somewhere a shift in everything I thought I knew about myself. Vivian was Owen's mother, a woman with a life I could only imagine. But she was also the one who'd seen me, really seen me, when I was just a wallflower in a packed room. She'd made me feel alive not just on that floor, but in the bookstore, in every message. I thought back to her words on invisibility, on wanting to be seen, and I realized I wanted that too. Not just to see her, but to be someone who didn't fade from her world. Whatever it became, it wasn't a dance anymore. It was a step towards something real. Something I wasn't sure I was ready for, but something I couldn't walk away from. Goodbye? In the fleeting sway of a wedding night's dance, where lights twinkle like forgotten promises, I stumbled onto a truth that hits us all square in the chest. Invisibility isn't fate, it's a choice we make out of fear. Vivian, that poised woman in her 40s, mother of the groom, confessed in the shadowed hush of a flower-lined garden her weariness at being reduced to a blurry outline, the one you nod to politely before forgetting. And yet, in the hesitant steps we shared on that floor, she came alive, seen for the first time not as scenery, but as a vibrant soul who could unsettle a shy young heart. This isn't some polished romance. It's a mirror held up to our own isolations. How many of us blend into the crowd, burying our longings under routines, proprieties, or years that chain us down? Me, a quiet guy who favors screens over stairs, I learned that life isn't a solo waltz. It's a call to dare, to dance with the unknown, to whisper, "I see you," to the one hiding behind masks. Because in that simple act, we don't just heal them, we revive ourselves, stirring a pulse we thought gone quiet. This story whispers that love, friendship, true connection, they bow to no ages or labels. They spark from the guts to shatter silence, to extend a hand in the dark. And what if, like me, we chose to stop being invisible? What if we grasped that fragile thread linking lost souls? Let this lesson echo. Every shared glance is a quiet revolution, a stride toward the light we all deserve. Share in the comments your own moment of feeling seen or unseen. These tales weave our shared humanity. And if stories like this stir your soul, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a one. Together, let's make the invisible seen.